Hello, I'm Kim Martinez, professor at the University of Burgos. I'm presenting my research on critical perspectives surrounding the use of generative AI in video game art production, focusing on how specialized press constructs what I call narratives of resistance. The video game industry has always been technologically driven, but in recent years we have seen a major shift. AI is no longer just used for gameplay systems like NPC behavior. It is now directly involved in content creation, especially in art production. This includes textures, concept art, animations, and even voice acting. Industry actors promote these tools as a way to reduce costs and accelerate production. However, this rapid adoption has generated a strong controversy. There is an increasing tension between technological innovation and artistic integrity, raising questions about authorship, labor conditions, and the quality of AI-generated content. This shift is driven by strong economic incentives. The AI in gaming market is expected to grow dramatically in the next decade. At the same time, game development is becoming more complex, especially with open worlds and high-fidelity graphics. AI is presented as a solution to these production bottlenecks. But this raises an important question. What are the consequences of integrating AI into the artistic core of games? The objective of this work is not to study AI as a technology itself, but to analyze how it is criticized. Specifically, I focus on the specialized press as a space where industry changes are interpreted, debated, and communicated to the public. The goal is to understand how generative AI is framed not as progress, but as a contested and problematic transformation. I use a qualitative content analysis methodology, focusing on articles published between 2024 and the present, which is the peak period of AI adoption. The sample includes 4 major Spanish specialized media outlets: Eurogamer, 3D Juegos, Vandal, and Hobby Consolas. From these sources, I selected articles that explicitly criticize or question the use of generative AI. And from this analysis, 4 main areas of criticism emerge. These 4 topics structure the entire debate. First, the limitations of AI in artistic expression. Second, ethical and legal issues. Third, concerns among industry workers. And fourth, broader economic impacts. I will now go through each one of these. The first major criticism is that generative AI limits artistic expression. These systems do not create truly new ideas. They recombine existing data. As a result, many outputs are perceived as derivative or homogenized. This leads to the idea of soulless content, lacking intention and symbolic depth. And this also suggests a risk of aesthetic stagnation, where games become increasingly similar. One example is the controversy around NVIDIA's DLSS 5 that shows how AI can interfere with artistic intent. Critics argue that this neural rendering technology alters characters and visuals, turning it into what many describe as an artificial filter that distorts the original art style. Another case is Codex Mortis, the game that was promoted as a fully AI-generated game, highlights the problem of originality, and instead of innovation, it was widely criticized for being a direct clone of existing titles and reinforcing the idea that AI recombines rather than creates. The second issue is ethical and legal concerns. Generative AI is trained on massive datasets that often include copyrighted artworks without permission. This raises serious questions, like who owns AI-generated content and who should be compensated. There is also a growing crisis of trust. Players and critics increasingly demand transparency. For example, in the case of Crimson Desert, players identified visual anomalies that suggested the use of AI-generated assets. The backlash forced the studio to admit it and even replace most of these elements. That shows how lack of transparency can damage trust. This type of problems not only involve consumers, but also publishers, such as those behind Tunic. They have raised serious concerns about AI-generated content. They argue that using assets trained on unlicensed data creates legal risk and makes projects potentially unusable due to copyright uncertainty. The third area focuses on industry workers. AI is strongly associated with job insecurity, and this is aggravated because in recent years, thousands of workers were laid off. Beyond job loss, there is concern about the loss of entry-level roles, which are essential for training new talent. There are also concerns about quality. Developers argue that replacing experienced artists with AI or outsourced labor can harm the artistic coherence of games. In fact, at Gamescom 2025, AI became one of the most controversial topics among developers. Many describe the event as ethically problematic due to the overwhelming presence of AI-generated content and the growing stigma attached to its use. Other industry referents, as the game director Yoko Taro, have warned that AI could eventually replace human creators entirely. He even suggested that developers might become obsolete, reduced to something like bards in a fully automated industry. Finally, there is the economic impact. On one hand, AI-driven games are generating significant revenue. However, the benefits are uneven. The AI boom is contributing to a hardware crisis, and the necessary investment is not the same for huge companies than for indie developers. And the increase of cost is also affecting players. One of the unexpected economic consequences is that the predicted RAM shortage in 2026. As major companies prioritize AI infrastructure, hardware resources are becoming more expensive and less accessible for both developers and players. As another example, the game Claroscure Expedition 33 lost its Game of the Year award after it was revealed that AI had been used in its development. This case shows how AI can become a reputational and institutional risk, even when the game itself is successful. In conclusion, generative AI is not a neutral technological tool. It introduces constraints on artistic expression, unresolved ethical and legal conflicts, and significant tensions within the labor structure. Its economic benefits are also unevenly distributed. Overall, the industry is at a crossroads between efficiency and sustainability. This leads to a final question. Will generative AI become a legitimate part of game development, or will resistance from developers, artists, and players limit its role? At this point, its future in the industry remains uncertain. Thank you for your attention, and I will be glad to answer your questions.